The alley smelled of rain and rust. Maya, no older than 9, dragged a torn jute bag almost as big as herself. Each clink of a bottle was a small victory. The night vendors barely noticed her, just another street child blending into the city's forgotten corners. She stopped beside a bakery window fogged with warmth. Inside, a boy her age laughed over a piece of chocolate cake, his cheeks glowing under soft yellow light. Maya smiled faintly, not out of envy but out of a strange joy. Happiness looked beautiful, even if it wasn't haze. She moved on, her stomach rumbling. The plastic bottles fetched half a cent each, maybe less. But she wasn't collecting for herself. Every penny was for Grandma Rose, the only person who had ever hugged her without judgment, the only one who still believed in miracles. At the small recycling center near the railway bridge, Maya emptied her bag. The man behind the counter counted with impatient fingers. "That's 52 bottles," he muttered, handing her a few wrinkled notes. Maya took them carefully, folding them as if they were treasure. "Tomorrow I'll bring more," she promised. "Sure, kid," he replied, not looking up. The hospital wasn't far, but the walk felt endless. The streets were quieter now, the kind of silence that echoes. As she passed an expensive restaurant, she stopped to watch people in suits laugh under chandeliers. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost between two worlds. Inside the hospital, the nurse frowned when she saw Maya. "Visiting hours are over, sweetheart. I just need to see my grandma. Please." The nurse sighed. 5 minutes. Maya tiptoed inside the dim ward. Grandma Rose lay there, frail and pale, her breathing shallow. The girl placed the crumpled notes beside the bed. "I got more today. Grandma," she said softly. "Soon you'll have your medicine. I promise." Rose smiled weakly. "You're my sunshine. Maya, don't forget to rest." Maya shook her head. "I can rest when you're better." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Somewhere in that same city, a man named Daniel Carter, billionaire CEO of Carter Enterprises, stared blankly at his office window. His company logo shimmered from the building opposite, but he felt nothing. Success had filled his life with noise and emptiness. His assistant had just mentioned a donation request from the same hospital Maya visited, but he'd brushed it off. "Another charity case," he'd said coldly. The next morning, Maya was back on the streets before sunrise. Her hands were cold, but she hummed softly, a tune Grandma used to sing. She searched under benches, beside dumpsters, behind grocery shops. Every bottle mattered. Around noon, she spotted a man in a suit step out of a black car. A gust of wind blew a stack of papers from his hand, scattering them across the street. People walked past, uninterested. Maya rushed forward, grabbing each sheet before they flew away. "Hey, mister," she said, smiling as she handed them back. Daniel looked down at her, a small girl covered in date, holding his important documents with both hands. "Thank you," he said, surprised. She nodded shyly. They were gonna fly away. He studied her for a moment. "You should be in school, not on the streets." "I'll go one day," she replied, "when Grandma's better." "Your grandmother's sick." Maya nodded. "I'm collecting bottles so I can buy her medicine." Something about her tone, so honest, so pure, made Daniel pause. "If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters." He reached into his pocket and handed her a few bills. "Hey, take this. Get your grandma what she needs." Maya hesitated. "Thank you, sir, but I only take what I earn." Daniel blinked. "You don't want it." She shook her head gently. "I'll learn it tomorrow. Grandma says real help comes from hard work." He smiled faintly, something he hadn't done in years. "You remind me of someone I used to know." "Maybe your grandma too," she said innocently. Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe." As she walked away, clutching her empty bag, Daniel watched her disappear into the crowd. For reasons he couldn't explain, that little girl's words stayed in his mind long after she was gone. That night, Maya sat beside Grandma Rose again. "Guess what, Grandma? A rich man gave me money, but I didn't take it." Rose opened her tired eyes. You did the right thing, child. Kindness is noble, but dignity is priceless. Maya smiled and kissed her forehead. Tomorrow, I'll bring more bottles. Outside, the rain returned, soft, rhythmic, endless, as though the city itself whispered a lullaby for those who still believed in goodness. But far away, in a penthouse high above the clouds, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, that determined little girl, picking bottles under the rain, refusing charity with grace. He didn't know her name yet, but something inside him had shifted, and by morning, that feeling would change both their lives forever. Daniel arrived at his office earlier than usual, the city still yawning beneath the dawn haze. His assistant, Claire, blinked in surprise. "You're early, sir." He didn't answer right away. He was staring at the same recycling center he'd driven past 100 times without noticing. Today, however, he saw the crowd of children dragging sacks larger than themselves. Among them, a small figure with tangled hair, humming softly, stacking bottles neatly in a crate. Maya. He couldn't help but watch. Something about the rhythm of her movements felt like a story unfolding. She didn't rush, didn't complain, every bottle placed carefully, as though it mattered. When the man at the counter handed her a few coins, her face lit up as if she'd been given the world. Daniel's chest tightened. He turned to Claire. "Find out about that hospital we got a donation request from last week. I want to visit." "Of course, sir. Should I inform the press?" He shook his head. "No, not this time." Hours later, Maya sat outside the hospital, counting her money again. She had enough for only half the medicine. The nurse at the counter gave her a sympathetic smile. "Sweetheart, the price went up this week. I'm sorry." Maya's heart sank. "Please, can I just get half?" "I wish I could help, but rules are rules." Her throat tightened. She walked back to Grandma Rose's room, holding back tears. Rose smiled faintly when she saw her. "Don't cry, my love. We'll find a way." "But how?" Maya whispered. "I try every day." "Because we don't give up, that's how." Rose's fingers brushed over her granddaughter's cheek, trembling yet strong. "Remember, kindness finds its way back. Always." That night, Daniel visited the same hospital under a fake name. The hall smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. He met the head nurse, who looked startled when he offered to cover several unpaid patient bills. "There's one patient I'd like to meet," he said quietly. "An elderly woman named Rose." The nurse nodded, leading him down the dim corridor. Inside the room, Maya sat asleep, her head resting on the edge of the bed. Rose looked up weakly, her voice soft. "Are you from the charity office?" Daniel hesitated. "Something like that." He looked at Maya, her little hand clutching a torn cloth doll, her face peaceful despite exhaustion. "She's your granddaughter." Rose smiled proudly. "My whole world. She collects bottles just to buy my medicine. I've told her not to, but she doesn't listen. She says love is stronger than tired feet." Daniel's throat tightened. "She's special." "Yes," Rose said, her voice trembling. "And she's all I have." He left quietly, but his mind wouldn't let go of what he'd seen. In his car, he looked at his reflection in the dark window, a man who had everything yet somehow had nothing. For the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt small. The next morning, Maya returned to the recycling center. But this time, something unexpected happened. The man behind the counter greeted her with a smile. "Hey, kid, today's rate went up, double for every bottle." Maya's eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah, company policy or something." She didn't know that Daniel had called earlier, arranging it quietly. He didn't want her to know. Not yet. He just wanted to help her without stealing her pride. By noon, Maya had more money than ever before. She ran to the hospital, heart racing with hope. Grandma Rose's medicine. Finally, she placed the bills on the counter, her voice trembling with joy. "I can pay now." The nurse smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. Sweetheart, you really love your grandma, don't you?" Maya nodded. "More than anything." As she walked out holding the medicine bag, she didn't see Daniel standing across the street, watching silently. There was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a quiet ache that comes from remembering what it means to care. He whispered under his breath, "Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Right, yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think." That evening, Daniel called Claire again. "I want you to arrange something discreet. A scholarship fund for children like her. Name it Rose Hearts." Claire blinked. "That's beautiful, sir. But why Rose?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because one little girl reminded me that some flowers grow even through concrete." Meanwhile, Maya sat beside her grandmother, reading from an old storybook. The rain pattered against the window again, steady and soft. Rose squeezed her hand weakly. "See, child? I told you, kindness always comes back." Maya leaned closer, her eyes glistening. "Then maybe one day I can help someone too." Outside, the city lights blurred through the glass, glowing like stars reflected in tears, a quiet promise that this story wasn't finished yet. Days passed, and life began to shift like slow sunlight creeping into forgotten corners. Grandma Rose's health improved little by little. The medicine worked, but Maya still collected bottles every morning. Habit had become hope. Every clang of plastic, every glint of glass in her small hands felt like proof that love could move mountains, even tiny ones made of trash. Across the city, Daniel couldn't shake her from his thoughts. During board meetings, while his team discussed millions in mergers, he found himself wondering what Maya was doing at that very moment. Was she eating? Was her grandmother smiling again? He didn't understand why it mattered so much, but it did. One afternoon, he drove back to the recycling center, hoping to see her. The man at the counter looked up. "That little girl? She hasn't come today," he said. "Maybe she's sick." A strange panic rose in Daniel's chest. "Sick?" "Yeah," said her grandma wasn't feeling well again. Without hesitation, Daniel drove to the hospital. He walked quickly down the same corridor, his heart pounding louder with every step. But when he reached a familiar room, the bed was empty. He turned sharply. "Where is she?" "The old lady who was here. Rose?" The nurse sighed softly. "I'm sorry, sir. She was moved to the critical unit last night. Her condition worsened." Daniel froze. "And the girl?" "She's in the waiting room. She hasn't eaten since yesterday." He followed the nurse silently. Maya sat curled on a bench, her head resting against the wall, her eyes red and puffy. In her lap lay the same torn cloth doll. When she looked up and saw him, she blinked in confusion. You're the man with the papers," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, I came to see your grandma." "She's not waking up," Maya said, her voice breaking. "They said she needs another treatment, but it costs too much. I tried to collect more bottles." Her words shattered something deep inside him. For the first time, Daniel knelt, not as a billionaire, but as a man stripped of pride. "Listen, Maya, I'll take care of it, all right? Your grandma will get what she needs." "But I don't want to owe you," she said softly. "Grandma says debts make the heart heavy." "You won't owe me anything," he replied. This is a gift from someone who finally remembered what kindness feels like." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes wide and sincere. "You're a good man, mister." He smiled sadly. "I'm trying to be." The next day, the treatment began. Daniel stayed close by, sometimes bringing food for Maya, sometimes just sitting quietly beside her in the sterile hallway. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them carried its own meaning. On the third evening, the doctor stepped out of the ward, exhaustion etched on his face. Maya jumped up. "Is Grandma okay?" The doctor smiled gently. "She's stable now. The medicine is working." Maya covered her mouth as tears spilled freely. She turned to Daniel and hugged him tightly. Thank you. He froze for a second, then placed a trembling hand on her back. The hug was small, warm, and pure, a kind of love money couldn't buy. That night, they shared a simple dinner in the hospital cafeteria, noodles and bread. Maya ate with the delight of someone who had learned to be grateful for everything. Daniel watched her laugh at something the cook said, and his heart softened in ways he hadn't felt in decades. "Do you miss your family?" she asked suddenly, her tone innocent yet piercing. Daniel looked down. "I used to have one, but I lost them, not to death, but to distance." "Then maybe you can find them again," Maya said with quiet conviction. "Grandma says nothing stays lost if you look with love." Her words struck deeper than she could know. Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. "You sound just like her." "Maybe that's why you found us," she said. He didn't answer, only nodded slowly, because deep down, he knew she was right. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." Later that evening, Daniel stood by the hospital window. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a clean, silvery glow over the city. He looked down at the street where people rushed under umbrellas, and he realized something simple yet profound. Wealth wasn't about numbers. It was about moments like this, a child's gratitude, an old woman's smile, the quiet peace of knowing you did something good. He whispered into the night, "Maybe this is what I was meant to find." But fate, as always, had more chapters to unfold, and not all of them would be gentle. Days turned into weeks, and the hospital became a second home for Maya. The nurses adored her, often slipping her an extra muffin or patting her shoulder as she passed by. She always smiled back, never asking for more. Grandma Rose was recovering slowly, her voice growing stronger, though her body remained fragile. Daniel visited every day now, quietly, without the entourage of cameras that used to follow him. He'd bring flowers, warm food, sometimes a small toy. Maya began to wait for him, her face lighting up the moment she saw his silhouette in the corridor. "Good afternoon, Miss Bottle Collector." He'd tease gently. She'd giggle. "And good afternoon, Mr. Paper Saver." It became their private joke, born from the day they met. But one afternoon, Daniel arrived to find Maya outside the hospital, sitting on the steps, holding her empty bag again. "What are you doing here? You should be with your grandma." Her eyes were heavy. "They said we need to pay for another round of treatment. I don't want to ask you again, so I thought I'd done it." Daniel's heart twisted. "Maya," she interrupted softly, "you helped before. Now it's my turn. Grandma says we should always give back." He crouched beside her. "Sometimes giving back isn't about money, Maya. Sometimes it's about letting others care for you." She looked up at him, thoughtful. "Then maybe I'm still learning that." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We both are." The sun dipped behind clouds, painting the sky with soft orange and gray. They sat together quietly as the world passed, an unlikely pair, bound by something stronger than circumstance. That evening, Daniel invited Maya and Rose to move into a private hospital suite. He covered every expense under a fake foundation name. Rose protested, but Maya whispered, "Please, Grandma, let's stay. He just wants to help." Rose finally nodded, tears in her eyes. "You remind me of my son," she told Daniel softly. "He was about your age when he left to find work. I never saw him again." Daniel froze for a moment, feeling a pang deep inside his chest, as if those words carried the weight of his own regrets. "I'm sorry," he said gently. She smiled weakly. "Don't be. Maybe God sent another one in his place." Later that night, Maya drew on a napkin using a broken pencil. It was a stick figure of her grandma, and Daniel standing under a rainbow. She handed it to him shyly. "So you don't forget us." Daniel stared at it for a long time, his throat tight. "I don't think I could." As weeks passed, Rose's strength returned. She could walk again, slowly, holding Maya's hand. Daniel had become part of their daily rhythm. Breakfast visits, short walks, laughter echoing softly in sterile halls. But one morning, he arrived to find chaos. Nurses running, alarms beeping. His heart pounded as he pushed through the crowd toward Rose's room. Inside, Maya was crying uncontrollably. "Grandma! Grandma! Wake up!" Rose lay still, her hand cold in Maya's tiny fingers. The monitor flatlined. Daniel froze, disbelief washing over him. The doctor placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. She went peacefully, Dear, she wasn't in pain. Maya screamed, clutching her grandmother's arm. No, she promised. She promised she'd stay. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling. Maya. She turned to him, eyes wild with grief. You said she'd get better. You said she'd be okay. He knelt beside her, unable to stop his own tears. I'm so sorry. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing so hard it broke something deep inside him. He held her tightly, rocking her as if she were his own child. The funeral was small, just Daniel, a few nurses, and Maya. The sky wept with them, a thin drizzle falling over the cemetery. Maya placed a single daisy on the grave. Goodbye, Grandma. I'll make you proud. I'll keep being kind. Daniel stood behind her, silent, the rain mixing with tears he no longer tried to hide. After the burial, Maya turned to him, her face pale and streaked. I don't know what to do now, she whispered. She was everything. Daniel knelt again, meeting her gaze. You still have dreams, Maya, and you still have me. Her lip trembled. Why are you helping me? Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it, he said softly, and maybe this is my chance to make it right. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. That night, Maya slept in the hospital waiting room, clutching her doll. Daniel sat across from her, watching the rise and fall of her small chest. He realized then, he wasn't just helping a child anymore. He was protecting the last piece of goodness he had left. And from that day on, he made himself a promise. Maya would never be alone again. Weeks slipped by quietly, like pages turning in a book no one wanted to end. Maya had stopped collecting bottles. The street she once called home now seemed like distant memories, with asphalt, clinking glass, and the hum of city lights whispering her name. She now stayed at Daniel's home, though she called it Grandma's borrowed sky. Daniel had prepared a small room for her, pale blue walls, a soft bed, and a window that opened to a skyline of glittering towers. The first night she slept there, she whispered to the stars, Grandma, I hope you can see this. Daniel stood by the doorway, watching her drift into dreams, the doll still tucked under her arm. He'd never felt so protective in his life. Not even during the years he'd built his empire from nothing, when all he'd chased was success, not meaning. Maya brought warmth into his cold, orderly mansion. She filled the halls with chatter and laughter, naming each of his houseplants after cartoon characters. That one's Mr. Leafington, she said one morning, pointing at a tall fern. He looks like he has secrets. Daniel laughed, a sound even his own staff weren't used to hearing. You're something else, you know that. I'm just me, she said, grinning. School followed soon after. Daniel enrolled her quietly under a scholarship, using the same alias he had created, Rose Hart's Foundation. Maya didn't know it was his. She only knew she was getting a chance to study, something her grandmother had always wished for her. But despite the joy, nights were still hard. Sometimes, Daniel would find her sitting by the window, staring at the sky. Can't sleep? He'd ask gently. I just miss her, Maya would whisper. When I close my eyes, I see her smiling. Then I open them, and she's gone. Daniel sat beside her one night, the city shimmering beyond the glass. You know, missing someone doesn't mean they are gone. It means they left something inside you that can't die. She turned to him. Do you miss someone too? He hesitated. Yes, my son. Her eyes softened. Where is he? Far away, he said quietly, and not because he had to be. Maya leaned her head on his arm, the kind of gesture that healed without words. Maybe you can find him again, like Grandma said. Daniel looked out at the night, and for the first time, the thought didn't feel impossible. The next morning, Maya packed her school bag. Do you think Grandma would be proud of me? She asked. Daniel smiled warmly. She'd be the proudest person in the world. He drove her to school himself that day, watching her run through the gates, waving back with a tiny hand. Something inside him quietly repaired. But as life began to bloom again, an unexpected letter arrived. A legal notice, sealed in cold. Daniel opened it, and his chest tightened. It was from his estranged son, Nathan Carter, a man he hadn't spoken to in over 15 years. Father, it began. I've heard about your new charity and your little companion. If this is another attempt to buy redemption, I want no part in it. But if you truly wish to see me, come find me yourself. Otherwise, stay buried in your guilt. Daniel folded the letter slowly, his hand trembling. Maya noticed his silence at dinner. You look sad, she said, chewing quietly. Just old memories, he replied. She reached across the table, touching his hand gently. Grandma said we can't change yesterday, but we can choose what tomorrow feels like. Her words hit him like sunlight through fog. He smiled faintly. You sound wiser every day. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood by Maya's door, watching her sleep peacefully, the faint rhythm of her breathing steady as a heartbeat. Then he whispered, You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. The following weekend, Daniel took Maya to the park. They fed pigeons, laughed at street performers, and watched kites twist above them. As they sat on a bench, Maya looked up and said softly, Do you think Grandma would forgive the people who hurt her before? Daniel turned to her slowly. She sounds like someone who already did. Maya nodded, thoughtful. Then maybe we should forgive too. It makes our hearts lighter. He smiled, a sad, hopeful smile. You're right. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel made a decision. He would find Nathan. Not for himself, but because a little girl had reminded him that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was love's final form. He looked at Maya, her laughter echoing through the park, and thought, maybe this is what redemption looks like. The following week carried a quiet tension that neither of them could name. Daniel seemed distant, often lost in thought, staring at his phone or old photographs he kept locked in a drawer. Maya sensed it but didn't pry. She had learned that sometimes silence told its own story. One evening, she walked into his study, where the soft glow of a desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. Daniel was holding a framed picture, a younger version of himself standing beside a teenage boy with the same determined eyes. Is that your son? Maya asked gently. He nodded, his throat tight. Nathan. He used to laugh like you do. What happened? Daniel set the frame down, the sound soft but heavy. I was too busy building my world and forgot to live in it. I missed birthdays, promises, everything. When his mother died, he blamed me. Maybe he was right. Maya stepped closer. Then find him. Grandma said it's never too late to knock on someone's heart. Daniel smiled faintly. You really believe that? She nodded without hesitation. Yes. Because people change. You change for me. Her words lingered in the air, fragile and luminous. That night, Daniel wrote a message he had rewritten 100 times in his mind. Nathan, I want to see you. No excuses, no speeches. Just a father who's sorry. He hit send before fear could stop him. The next morning, he woke to a single reply. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The cafe by Riverside Park. He read it twice, then exhaled shakily. Maya walked in, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Good morning. He smiled nervously. Morning, sunshine. How do you feel about coming with me somewhere tomorrow? Where? To help me fix something I broke a long time ago. She tilted her head, curious, like a broken toy. Daniel chuckled softly. Something like that, only heavier. The next day was bright but cold, the wind crisp enough to make Maya bury her hands in her coat pockets. The cafe was small, tucked between old brick buildings, smelling of roasted beans and rain-soaked wood. Nathan was already there, sitting by the window. His face had hardened with age, but those eyes, those same Carter eyes, still held a flicker of warmth buried under resentment. When Daniel walked in, Nathan didn't stand. His gaze shifted to Maya, who hovered shyly beside Daniel. So this is the girl? He asked. Daniel nodded. Her name's Maya. She's part of my life now. Nathan scoffed softly. Another charity project. Maya frowned. He's not helping me because I'm poor. He's helping me because he has a big heart. Nathan's expression faltered for a moment, Caught off guard by the child's conviction, Daniel leaned forward. She lost her grandmother, the only family she had. I couldn't let her face the world alone. Nathan looked between them, torn between anger and something deeper. So now you play father to strangers. Daniel's voice broke slightly. Because I failed the one I had. Silence stretched thin. The hum of the cafe filled the space between their words. Maya tugged Daniel's sleeve gently. Grandma said when hearts fight, love should speak louder. Daniel's eyes softened. She's right. Nathan stared at her, then at his father. The hardness began to melt, piece by piece. You really think we can fix this? He whispered. Daniel reached across the table, his voice trembling. I don't know, but I want to try. I'm tired of pretending I don't miss my own son. For a long moment, Nathan didn't move. Then, slowly, his hand lifted, hesitant, shaking, and rested atop Daniel's. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning of it. Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. See? Grandma was right again. Nathan looked at her curiously. You sound just like her. She was the smartest person I ever knew, Maya replied softly. She said when people forgive, the sky gets lighter. Maybe it just did, Daniel murmured. Outside, the wind eased, and sunlight filtered through the clouds like a quiet blessing. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. They spent the afternoon talking, not about money or guilt, but about memories. The fishing trips they never took, the birthdays Daniel missed, the laughter they still remembered. When they finally left the cafe, Nathan looked down at Maya. Thank you for being brave enough to remind him what family means. She grinned. You're welcome. Maybe we can all have pancakes next time. Daniel laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that felt like freedom. I think that's the best idea I've heard in years. For the first time in a very long while, Daniel walked away not as a businessman or benefactor, but as a father, and as a man finally learning to forgive himself. But deep down, both he and Maya knew their story wasn't ending here. It was only finding its light. The following months unfolded like gentle dawn, slow, tender, full of small beginnings. Daniel and Nathan began meeting every Sunday, sometimes over coffee, sometimes for long drives where silence said more than words ever could. Maya joined often, her laughter bridging the gap between father and son, turning awkward moments into fragile peace. Daniel could hardly believe how much life had changed. The emptiness that used to echo through his mansion now rang with laughter, footsteps, and the occasional sound of Maya's cartoons playing too loud. Even his staff moved differently, lighter, warmer, as if kindness had become contagious. One Saturday morning, Daniel watched from the doorway as Maya and Nathan built a birdhouse together in the garden. She wore one of Nathan's old caps, oversized and tilted sideways. You nailed it crooked, she giggled, pointing. Nathan laughed. It's called artistic expression. Daniel smiled quietly. The sight was so ordinary, so beautiful, it almost made him forget the years of loneliness that came before. Later that day, they sat together for lunch, sunlight spilling through the windows like liquid gold. Maya held her glass of juice high. To Grandma Rose, she said softly. Daniel and Nathan exchanged a glance and raised their glasses too. To Grandma Rose, they echoed. After the meal, Maya excused herself to feed the birds outside. Daniel watched her go, then turned to his son. I don't know how to thank you for giving me another chance. Nathan shook his head. You didn't need to earn it. You just needed to show up. Daniel's eyes misted. I wish I'd known that sooner. Nathan's voice softened. Maybe it took meeting her to remind you. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe it did. That evening, Daniel sat by the fireplace, a letter resting on his lap. It was from the Rose Hearts Foundation, the initiative he had created in secret, now expanding across the city, helping hundreds of children like Maya. The thought filled him with quiet pride. He whispered, You see, Rose, your kindness didn't end with you. Just then, Maya entered, clutching her sketchbook. I drew something for you. She handed him the paper. It was a drawing of all three of them, Daniel, Nathan, and her, standing under a giant heart with wings. Underneath, she'd written, "Some hearts never stop helping." Daniel's throat tightened as he pulled her into a hug. "You have no idea how much this means." "I just drew what's real," she said simply. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, and rain began to fall, not harsh, but calm, like a lullaby from heaven. Maya ran to the window, pressing her palms to the glass. "Look! Grandma's watering the sky." Daniel laughed softly, tears welling in his eyes. "Yeah, maybe she is." That night, as lightning flashed faintly beyond the clouds, Daniel sat at his desk, writing a letter addressed to the future. He wrote, "If you ever forget what love feels like, remember the hands that helped you when you were too small to lift yourself. Remember the faces that didn't look away when you were broken. And remember, kindness doesn't need witnesses. It just needs a heart that refuses to stop giving." He folded the letter and placed it inside a small wooden box, the same one that once held his company's first earnings. Now it held something far richer. Maya peeked in. "What's that?" "A promise," Daniel said, "to never forget." She nodded solemnly. "Then I'll help you keep it." "Deal." They shook hands, sealing it like a secret between souls. As the rain subsided, Daniel opened the window slightly. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant jasmine. He closed his eyes, letting the peace wash over him. Then Maya's small voice broke the silence. "Do you think Grandma's proud of us?" Daniel smiled, his eyes glistening. "I think she's smiling so wide right now that the stars can't keep up." Maya giggled and leaned against him. "Then let's make her keep smiling." He kissed her forehead. "Always." The next morning, the clouds cleared, leaving behind a sky washed clean. Birds fluttered around the crooked birdhouse, the one she and Nathan had made, chirping loudly as if thanking them. Maya ran to the garden, laughing as the sun warmed her cheeks. Daniel and Nathan followed, watching her spin in circles, her joy spilling like light across the grass. In that moment, everything felt whole. The grief, the loss, the redemption, all pieces of the same story stitched together by grace. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." And as Maya lifted her face toward the sky, eyes closed, arms outstretched, the world seemed to pause, not in sorrow this time, but in perfect, breathtaking peace. Spring arrived like a sigh of relief. The city wore its new colors proudly, blooming jacarandas lined the streets, and sunlight painted everything in shades of gold. For Maya, life had become something she never imagined. Mornings filled with school bells, evenings filled with laughter, and nights where dreams felt safe. Every Sunday, she, Daniel, and Nathan visited Grandma Rose's grave. Maya always brought fresh daisies, the same kind she laid down the day she said goodbye. She'd whisper stories about her week, about her grades, about the birdhaze that now had tiny chicks inside. She'd be proud, Daniel said one morning, kneeling beside her. Maya smiled softly. "I think she knows already." Nathan stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, watching the two of them. He had changed too, less guarded, more human. The three of them had become a strange, beautiful kind of family, stitched not by blood, but by loss, kindness, and second chances. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter in the mail, from the hospital. Inside was a photo of Rose, smiling from her bed, taken weeks before she passed. Attached was a note written by one of the nurses. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Rose once told us that if love ever knocks on your door wearing old shoes and a tired smile, let it in. She said that love often comes disguised as someone who needs saving, but ends up saving you instead." Daniel sat at his desk, reading those words over and over, tears sliding down his cheeks. He placed the photo in a frame beside Maya's latest drawing and whispered, "You were right, Rose. You always were." That evening, Maya found him there and climbed onto his lap. "You're crying again," she said softly. He chuckled through the tears. "Happy tears, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "Because of Grandma?" "Because of you," he said, brushing her hair gently. "You brought her kindness back to life." That night, they all sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker like stars falling to earth. Nathan leaned on the railing, his voice quiet. You ever think about how everything had to break first, before it could fit together? Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes things fall apart just to fall into place. Maya's eyes sparkled as she looked at both of them. That's what Grandma said too. She said broken hearts make the best light. Nathan smiled. She must have been really wise. The wisest, Daniel said, his voice warm. Silence settled around them, the kind that feels full instead of empty. Below, the city buzzed with life. Above, the stars kept their quiet vigil. The next morning, Daniel received an invitation from the mayor's office. The Rose Hearts Foundation had been nominated for a community award. He smiled at the thought of it, but when Maya saw the letter, she squealed, "We're famous." He laughed. "You mean you're famous? You started this." She puffed her chest proudly. "Well, Grandma started it. You and I just helped it grow." The award ceremony was held in the same hospital where everything had begun. The audience stood as Daniel walked up to the stage with Maya by his side, her small hand wrapped tightly around his. Nathan watched from the front row, his eyes shining with pride. Daniel took the microphone, his voice trembling slightly. "This isn't my award," he said. "It belongs to a woman named Rose, who taught me that kindness doesn't need recognition. It belongs to a little girl who showed me that dignity can live even in the poorest hearts. And it belongs to everyone who chooses to care, even when the world tells them not to." The room fell silent. Maya squeezed his hand and whispered, "You did great." After the applause faded, they stood outside the hospital entrance where it had all started. Maya looked up at him. "Do you think Grandma was watching?" Daniel smiled through the shimmer in his eyes. "No doubt." Maya raised her arms to the sky and shouted, "We did it, Grandma!" Her voice echoed, soft and pure, like the final note of a song that never really ends. Daniel laughed, pulling her into his arms. "Yes, we did." They stood there as the sunset painted the horizon, gold melting into crimson, the same colors that once lit the streets where a poor little girl had collected bottles, chasing hope one step at a time. Now, she didn't need to collect anything anymore. She had built something far greater, a world where kindness, once forgotten, breathed again. And as they walked away hand in hand, a child, a father, and a son, the city lights flickered behind them like candles in gratitude. Because sometimes, the smallest heart can teach the richest soul how to truly live. Sparkle's moral: no act of kindness is ever wasted. What you give in love always finds its way back. Sometimes not as coins or gifts, but as a family your heart didn't know it was missing.